Some nights change your whole life, and you don't even find out until the next morning. This is one of those stories. I'm Jonah. I'm 30 years old. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to come home from a contract job overseas, I got on an earlier flight. No warning, no text, nothing. I wanted to surprise my roommate, Sam. I did not expect that when I walked through that door, she'd sprint across the apartment, throw both arms around my neck, and refuse to let go for almost a full minute, shaking, crying into my shoulder like she'd thought I was never coming back at all. I thought it would be the best homecoming of my life. Instead, it was the beginning of the strangest, most painful, most eye-opening 2 weeks I've ever lived through. One that ended with a truth about Sam, about myself, and about what just roommates actually meant that I never saw coming. Let's start from the beginning. Sam and I had been roommates for 3 years. We met through a mutual friend when my old lease ended, and her previous roommate moved out to live with her boyfriend. It was supposed to be temporary, 6 months, tops, until we both got our finances sorted. 3 years later, neither of us had left. It wasn't romantic. At least, that's what I told myself, and what she told everyone else. We split rent, we split chores, we watched terrible reality TV on Sunday nights, and she was the first person I called when anything good or bad happened to me. She kept a spare key. She kept a spare key to my heart the same way she kept a spare key to the apartment. I didn't think about it much because it had just always been that way. She worked as a physical therapist at a clinic downtown. I worked in industrial engineering, and 6 months before this story starts, my company offered me a short-term overseas contract. 11 months working on a manufacturing line overseas, good money, resume building, the kind of opportunity you don't turn down, even if it means being away from home for almost a year. Sam helped me pack. She cried a little at the airport, which surprised me because Sam didn't cry in public. She hugged me for a long time then too, but nothing like what would happen when I came home early. I want to be clear about something because it matters for what happened later. Before I left, there were small things I noticed and dismissed. The way she'd go quiet sometimes when I talked about how excited I was to leave. The way she asked, more than once, "You're coming back after, right? Like, back here, to the apartment, to me, to us living together?" I laughed it off. Told her, of course. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't think about that again until much later. We texted constantly the first few months. Video calls on weekends. She'd show me the apartment, tell me which plants had died under my care before I left, and which ones she'd saved. I told her about the food overseas, the coworkers I was starting to like, the loneliness that crept in around month 4 when the novelty wore off and it was just work, a small rented room, and time zones that made everyone back home asleep when I was awake. Sam was the one who kept me sane. Some nights she'd stay up until 2 a.m. her time, just so we could talk for 20 minutes before my workday started. I started noticing I looked forward to those calls more than anything else in my day. More than the calls with my own family, if I'm honest, around month 7, the calls started getting less frequent. Not dramatically, just a missed call here, a sorry crazy week text there. I figured she was busy. Her job was demanding. She'd picked up extra shifts to cover rent, while I wasn't contributing as much, since my overseas housing was covered separately. But something in her text changed tone. Shorter. Less of the joking back and forth we used to have. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say, "Yeah, just tired," and change the subject. I told myself it was distance, time zones, normal wear and tear on a friendship stretched across an ocean. I was wrong about what it actually was. But I'll get to that. My contract had a clause allowing early completion if certain project milestones were hit ahead of schedule. Against all odds, our team finished 2.5 weeks early. My manager asked if I wanted to stay on for a bonus short extension project or fly home. I didn't hesitate. I wanted to surprise Sam. I pictured it 100 times on the 16-hour flight home. Walking in, her face lighting up, both of us laughing about how I'd pulled off keeping a secret for once. I bought her a stupid little gift at the layover airport. A keychain shaped like a tiny replica of a landmark near where I'd been living, the kind of cheesy souvenir she'd tease me mercilessly for and then keep forever. I didn't tell her I was coming. Not one text. I wanted the surprise to be real. Looking back, I wonder if I should have called first. Not because of what you might be thinking, I promise you, this isn't a cheating story, not the way you'd expect, but because what I walked into needed more preparation than I gave either of us. I used my key. The apartment was quiet, lights dim, early evening. I heard the shower running down the hall, dropped my bags by the door as softly as I could, and started grinning like an idiot, already rehearsing what I'd say when she walked out. The bathroom door opened. She stepped out in sweatpants and an old t-shirt of mine she'd apparently claimed as her own, hair-wet phone in her hand. She looked up, froze. The phone slipped out of her fingers and hit the floor. For 1 second, I thought she might scream. Instead, she just said my name, quiet, broken, like she didn't believe it, and then she was running, not walking. Running across the apartment in bare feet, and she threw both arms around my neck so hard it knocked me back a step into the door frame. She didn't say anything for a long time. She just held on. I could feel her shaking. Then I realized she was crying. Not happy tears exactly. Or not only happy tears. Something heavier. "You're here," she kept saying into my shoulder. "You're actually here." I laughed, a little confused, and hugged her back. "I wanted to surprise you. I got back 2 weeks early. Don't ever do that again," she said, and her voice cracked in a way that stopped my laugh in my throat. "Don't you ever leave like that again?" I pulled back to look at her face, and that's when I saw it wasn't just an emotional reunion. Something in her eyes looked like relief mixed with something closer to fear. Like she hadn't fully believed, some nights, that I'd come back at all. I chalked it up to missing me. I told her I missed her too. We stood in that doorway holding on to each other for almost a full minute before either of us said anything else, and in that minute, I remember thinking, I have never in my life been held like this by anyone. Not even people I dated. I didn't know yet that this hug was the first thread of a much bigger story I was about to unravel. The rest of that first night was warm. We ordered food from the place we used to get all the time, and she asked me 100 questions about the trip. But every so often I'd catch her glancing at her phone, flipping it face down fast when she noticed me looking. Small thing. I noted it and moved on. Over the next few days, more small things stacked up. There was a second toothbrush in the bathroom that wasn't mine, wasn't hers. Pale blue, worn bristles. When I asked about it, she said a friend had stayed over and forgot it, said it fast, moved to another topic before I could ask, which friend? There was a jacket in the hall closet, men's size large, that I didn't recognize and she definitely wasn't wearing. There was the fact that she'd started locking her bedroom door at night, something she'd never done in 3 years of living together. And there was the fact that twice in my first week home, she got a call, looked at the screen, went pale, and stepped outside onto the balcony to take it. Voice low, back to the sliding door, arms wrapped around herself like she was cold even though it was summer. I want to be honest, my mind went to the obvious place. I thought maybe she'd been seeing someone while I was gone. Which, to be clear, would have been completely her right. We were never together. I had no claim on her love life. But if that were it, why the fear on the balcony? Why the flinch every time her phone buzzed? People who are happily dating someone don't look like they're bracing for a blow every time a name pops up on their screen. Something else was going on. And whatever it was, it had been going on for a while. Long enough to explain those quieter, shorter texts near the end of my contract. Long enough, maybe, to explain why she'd cried at the airport 11 months earlier in a way that felt bigger than a normal. Goodbye. I decided to pay closer attention instead of asking directly. I'm not proud of that choice, but I wanted to understand what I was dealing with before I said anything that might make her shut down completely. 9 days after I got home, it happened. It was almost midnight. I was up because of leftover jet lag, sitting in the living room with the TV low, when I heard a car pull up outside, too loud, engine revving longer than it needed to, then pounding on our apartment door. Not knocking, pounding, aggressive, followed by a man's voice yelling Sam's name through the wood. Sam came out of her room in pajamas, face drained of color, and for a second she just stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the door like it might come off its hinges. Sam. I stood up. "Who is that?" "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't open it. Please, Jonah." The pounding kept going. The man outside started shouting things. Angry, slurred, half-coherent, something about her not answering calls, about her thinking she could just disappear from him. I felt something in my chest go cold and very still, the way it does right before you stop thinking and start acting. I called the police first, quietly, from the kitchen, giving them the address, while Sam stood shaking near the hallway. Then I went to the door, not opened it, just stood near it, and told the man on the other side, calmly as I could manage, that the police were already on their way and he needed to leave. It took him another minute of yelling before he finally left, tires screeching off down the street just as blue and red lights turned onto our block. The police took a report. Sam gave a statement in a small, flat voice I'd never heard her use before. When they left, it was just the two of us in a suddenly very quiet living room at 1 in the morning, and I finally asked the question I'd been sitting on for over a week. Sam, who was that? And what has been going on since I left? She sat down on the floor with her back against the couch, knees pulled up, and finally told me everything. About 4 months after I left for my contract, Sam had started seeing someone. His name doesn't matter for this story. She called him the whole time she talked, like she couldn't stand to use his name anymore. It was slow at first, normal, a guy from her gym who seemed attentive and easygoing. By month 6, the attentiveness had turned into checking her phone. By month 7, right around when our calls started getting shorter and quieter, it had turned into him showing up unannounced at her work, then at the apartment, then getting angry, then apologizing, then doing it again. A pattern she recognized too late, the way people often do, because she said she didn't tell me because I was a world away with no way to actually help, and she didn't want to worry me on top of everything else. And this was the part her voice broke on. She didn't want me to feel like I had to fly home and rescue her. She said she'd been trying to handle it herself. Changed her locks once. He'd shown up anyway, found ways in through friends of friends, through guilt, through showing up at her work with flowers, and an apology so convincing she'd let him back in twice, before finally cutting it off for good 6 weeks before I came home. Cutting it off hadn't stopped him. It had escalated things. The calls she'd been taking on the balcony were him, cycling between rage and pleading. The blue toothbrush and the jacket were relics from before she'd fully ended it, things she hadn't had the heart or the safety to just throw away yet, because every visit to take his things back had turned into another confrontation she'd been quietly terrified for months. Alone in the apartment we shared, with me too far away to be anything but a voice on a screen. And then you just walked in, she said, tears running freely now. 2 weeks early. No warning. I opened that bathroom door and you were just there, and for 1 second I thought I was imagining it, because I'd spent months wishing you were home, and safe was something I associated with you being in this apartment. That's why I couldn't let go of you. You have no idea what it felt like to finally feel safe again. I sat with that for a long moment, all those small things I'd noticed, the fear, the flinching, the locked door, the too long hug at the entryway. None of it had been about someone she was hiding from me in the sense I'd assumed. It had been about someone she'd been hiding from ease period, and I had walked in at the exact moment she needed someone in her corner most, without either of us planning it that way. Over the days that followed, we sorted out the practical things first. A restraining order filed properly this time, her work aware of the situation, a security camera installed at our door, her therapist recommending a support group she eventually joined. But something else had shifted too, and it took both of us a while to say it out loud. That first hug in the hallway, the one that lasted almost a full minute, the one where she shook and cried into my shoulder before I understood why, hadn't just been relief at not being alone with her fear anymore. It had been something she admitted to me on a quiet night about 3 weeks after I'd come home, sitting on the balcony where she used to take those frightened phone calls. I think somewhere in those 11 months, she said, not looking at me, missing you stopped being just missing a roommate. I didn't want to tell you because you were far away and stressed with work, and I didn't want to put anything else on you. But when you walked through that door, it wasn't just safety I felt. It was, I don't know, home. You felt like home in a way that scared me more than anything he ever did, if I'm honest, because it meant losing you would have hurt worse than anything. I told her the truth back, that somewhere around month 7 of daily video calls, I'd started looking forward to 20 minutes with her more than anything else that entire day, in every country I worked in. and that I'd told myself it was just closeness from being roommates for so long because it was easier than admitting what it actually was. We didn't rush anything after that conversation. Given everything she'd just survived, rushing into a relationship the same month felt like the wrong move for both of us, and we said so out loud to each other, which I think is part of why it eventually worked. It's been 8 months since that night on the balcony, the restraining order held. He never came back. Sam finished her support group and says she feels like herself again, more grounded than she's felt in over a year. We are, as of about 5 months ago, no longer just roommates. We took it slow. We talked about it more than either of us has ever talked about anything, and it turned into something real instead of something that happened out of fear and adrenaline in the wake of a scary night. People sometimes ask me what it felt like walking into that apartment and having her run into my arms like that. For a long time, I thought it was just a happy reunion. Now I know it was a woman who had been quietly terrified for months, finally exhaling for the first time in far too long, and I happened to be the person standing in the doorway when she finally could. I don't think I'll ever forget how tightly she held on that day, or how long it took me to understand why.